The man in the yellow hoodie. This happened back in the winter of 2019 when I was 24 and working the night shift at a gas station in rural New Mexico. It wasn't some big chain or anything, just a small, privately owned 24 by 7 spot off the side of a near deserted highway. We were right on the edge of town, and most of the customers came in between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. The overnight hours were mostly dead. My job was to restock the shelves, mop the floors, and stay awake. I worked alone. It started as a normal Tuesday night. Cold as hell outside, especially for the desert. The wind had that sound, low and mournful, scraping at the glass of the storefront. At around 2:15 a.m., I was behind the counter sipping lukewarm coffee when the bell above the door chimed. A guy walked in. He looked off, not crazy or drunk, just like he didn't belong there. He was wearing a bright yellow hoodie, no logo, no markings, but it was pulled up, shadowing his face. What I could see of him looked pale. Not sick pale, just like he didn't get out much. He didn't say a word, just walked over to the candy aisle and stood there, not moving, not browsing, just facing the shelves with his hands in his pockets. I greeted him, the usual, "Hey man, let me know if you need anything." No response. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. He never picked anything up, never moved. Eventually, I walked around the counter and approached him slowly, asking if he was okay. That's when he turned his head, slow, robotic, and just stared at me. His face. Something about it made me nauseous. Not because it was grotesque or bloody or anything like that. It was just blank. Totally blank. No emotion. Eyes wide open, not blinking. He looked like a mannequin that had just come to life. Then he smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even sinister. It was the kind of smile you'd see on someone who didn't know how to smile, like they were trying to imitate one. That's the only way I can describe it. I asked him again, "Are you all right?" He said, "Do you have a restroom?" I blinked. Not because of the question, but because of how he said it. It wasn't a question. It sounded like a script. Like he'd memorized the sentence phonetically, but didn't really know what it meant. I pointed to the back, next to the stockroom, and said, "Right past the drinks, on the left." He just turned and walked that way. I went back behind the counter, pretending to look at my phone, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept glancing at the security monitor, watching the restroom door. He went in and didn't come out. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I thought maybe he fell asleep in there or something, so I left the counter and knocked on the door. "Hey man, you okay in there?" No answer. I knocked again. Then I realized the door wasn't even locked. I pushed it open slowly, and the room was empty. Gone. No windows. No vents big enough for someone to crawl through. Just a disgusting little gas station bathroom with a flickering light overhead. I checked the stockroom. Nothing. I even went outside, walked around the building. He was nowhere. That was enough for me to call the owner. I told him I thought someone might be trying to mess with me or even rob the place. He said he'd check the camera footage in the morning and told me to keep the door locked until shift change. I didn't sleep that day. I kept replaying the moment in my head, his face, his voice, the way he just disappeared. But here's where it gets worse. 2 nights later, same shift. I'm halfway through restocking the drinks when the bell rings again. It's him. Same yellow hoodie. Same slow, heavy footsteps, same pale face. Except this time, he doesn't go to the candy aisle. He just stands in the entrance, staring straight at me. I say, "Hey, you okay?" He doesn't answer. I take a cautious step forward. "Do you need something?" His mouth opens, wider than seems normal, and he says, again in that weird, rehearsed voice, "Do you have a restroom?" I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. I didn't respond. I just slowly walked back behind the counter and hit the silent alarm button. He didn't move, just stared. Then, just as suddenly as he came, he turned and walked out. No car. No footsteps in the snow-covered parking lot. Nothing. When the cops showed up, I told them everything. They checked the perimeter, found no one. The footage? He wasn't on it. I kid you not, the camera showed me reacting, walking around the store, pressing the alarm. But nobody else was on screen. I stood there, mouth dry, as the officers looked at me like I was crazy. That was my last night working that job. I quit the next morning. But that's not the end. Months later, after I'd moved back to Albuquerque, I was scrolling Reddit out of boredom when I found this post in a paranormal sub. It was titled, "Man in Yellow Hoodie Watching Me Outside My House." Same guy. A dozen comments all describing the same person. No one could ever explain who he was or how he appeared, and always the same question in the same voice. Do you have a restroom? To this day, I have no explanation. No one does. But every time I walk into a gas station, a rest stop, or anywhere near a restroom sign, I feel that chill down my spine, and I always glance around, just in case. Because that smile, that wasn't human. The Whispering Apartment. In 2021, I moved into a small studio apartment in the city after breaking up with my girlfriend of 3 years. It was a rough time, emotionally, financially, mentally. I just needed a space that was mine, even if it was a box with a stove and a creaky mattress. The building was old. Brick walls, iron fire escapes, and a shared laundry room in the basement that always smelled like wet cardboard and mildew. Rent was cheap, which should have been a red flag in that part of town. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I just wanted out. I remember the first night I slept there, or tried to. It was quiet, unnaturally quiet, except for this faint whispering. At first, I thought it was my upstairs neighbors. Thin walls, right? But it wasn't coming from above. It was coming from the vent. The old rectangular vent near the floor on the wall by the bathroom. The one I'd never paid attention to. I crouched down and listened. It was soft, almost too soft to hear. But I swear it was a voice, muttering something rhythmically, like a chant. The words weren't in English. They weren't even words I recognized. I told myself it was the heat kicking on and making weird sounds. I was tired. I was imagining things. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, around 1:30 in the morning. Same whispering, from the same vent. This time, I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back, I heard nothing. Just white noise. I posted in a local Facebook group asking if anyone else in the building heard weird noises through the vents at night. No one responded, but the post got deleted within 10 minutes. Weird, right? A couple nights later, I'm woken up by a loud banging, like something slamming into my wall. I jumped out of bed and checked my phone. 1:34 a.m. The moment I looked at the vent, I froze. It was rattling, like something was pushing on it from inside. I got close and asked, "Is someone in there?" The whispering stopped. I backed away, closed my bedroom door, and didn't sleep until sunrise. The next day, I went down to the basement laundry room, and I noticed a door at the far end of the hall. It looked sealed shut with a chain and padlock. I figured it was a maintenance closet or storage. But something told me to ask the super. His name was Ramon. Mid-60s. Lived in the building forever. When I brought up the locked room, he got weirdly defensive. Said it was nothing, just old plumbing stuff. Then he added, "Best not to go poking around where you don't belong." I wanted to press more, but he walked away before I could. That night, the whispering came back. Louder, and I swear to God, it knew my name. I heard it. Clearly. Nathan, Nathan. I threw my phone at the vent out of panic. The whispering stopped instantly. I left the apartment that night and crashed at a coworker's place. Told them the truth. They laughed it off, but let me stay. When I returned the next morning, nothing looked touched. But something felt off. The air was heavy, thick. I went straight to the vent and unscrewed the cover. Inside was just a dark shaft, like any vent. But taped to the inside edge was a small piece of paper, folded. I pulled it out and unfolded it. It just said, "He watches through the walls." No handwriting, just printed in a jagged typewriter font. I nearly left right then. Instead, I called Ramon, told him I found the note, and demanded answers. There was silence on the line. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You opened it, didn't you?" I hung up. That night, I stayed again, dumb. I know, I didn't sleep. I sat with all the lights on, baseball bat in hand. At exactly 1:30, the light in the bathroom flickered and went out. Then the whispering started. But this time, it wasn't from the vent. It was from inside the apartment. I turned slowly and saw, in the dark corner by the closet, a silhouette. Tall, slouched, like someone pressed flat against the wall. But it wasn't solid. It shimmered like heat off pavement. Then it moved. I bolted, ran barefoot down 4 flights of stairs, and didn't stop until I hit the sidewalk. I called 911. I told them someone broke into my apartment. When the cops arrived, they found no sign of forced entry, nothing stolen, no one hiding inside. But the weirdest thing was what they did find. The closet where I saw the figure had been nailed shut from the inside, like someone or something had been living in the walls. I never went back after that. I didn't even collect my stuff. I left the key in the mailbox and paid the last month just to avoid the drama. I don't know who or what was in that apartment or how long it had been there. But sometimes, late at night, I'll be lying in bed in my new place, and I'll swear I hear it again. Whispers, calling my name, from inside the vents. Room 313. Back in 2017, I was traveling for work and stayed at a cheap hotel just outside of Nashville. It wasn't a rundown dive, but it definitely had that weird, sterile feel, like the kind of place people stay when they have no better options. I'd been on the road for a week, visiting clients in 3 different states. I was exhausted. I remember pulling into the parking lot and just sitting there in my rental car for a moment, staring up at the building, debating whether I should find a better place to crash. I didn't. I went inside and checked in. The front desk guy, early 20s, looked bored out of his mind, handed me a key card, and said I was in room 313, top floor, end of the hall. As I headed toward the elevator, he added, "If you hear anything weird at night, just ignore it." And then he smiled. I laughed it off like he was joking, but something about the way he said it felt off, like he wasn't joking at all. The room was basic: beige carpet, scratchy sheets, old TV mounted on the wall. I threw my bag down and took a shower, ordered some cheap takeout, tried to relax. I kept the TV on for background noise. Around midnight, I started getting ready to crash. That's when I heard it. A knock. It wasn't on my door, it was from the wall behind the headboard, like someone tapping, then pausing, then tapping again. I figured it was just another guest, maybe someone messing around or trying to hang a picture or something. Then the tapping turned into scratching, slow, rhythmic, like nails. I muted the TV. The sound was coming from directly behind the bed. I leaned in, pressing my ear to the wall. It stopped. Then, clear as day, I heard a voice whisper, "I see you." I jumped back so hard I knocked over the lamp. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to come up with some rational explanation. Paper-thin walls, pranked by a drunk guest, anything that made sense. Eventually, I called the front desk. The same guy answered. I told him I was hearing strange noises from the room next to mine. He asked what room I was in. I said, 313. There was a pause. Then he said, "Sir, there's no one in 312. I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, that room's under renovation. It's been empty for months." My stomach dropped. I asked if he could come check. He sighed and said he'd be up in a few minutes. When he knocked on my door, I opened it fast. He looked annoyed, but also nervous. I followed him as he unlocked the door to 312. Empty, dusty floor. furniture covered in plastic, a half-finished paint job on one wall. We both stood in silence. Then we heard it. 3 knocks from the shared wall on the 313th side. I looked at him. He said, "You want another room?" I said yes. Immediately, he moved me to 208 on the second floor. It was fine. No noises. No voices. But here's where it gets worse. The next morning, as I checked out, I saw a woman standing at the front desk, older, maybe mid-50s. She was talking to the same front desk guy I dealt with. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help overhearing what she said. She asked, "Are you still putting people in 313? He looked uncomfortable. "Only when we're full," she said. "You know it's not safe, right?" That caught my attention. I waited until she left and went back to the desk. I asked him, "What's the deal with that room? Something happened, didn't it?" He shook his head and said, "I'm not really supposed to talk about it. Corporate doesn't like us spreading stories." I kept pressing, and finally, he caved. Apparently, years ago, back when it was under different management, a man checked into room 313 and never checked out. Cleaning staff found him days later, dead in the bathroom. The police said it was suicide, but according to staff, the scene was strange. The guy had carved something into the wall. Not a note, not words, a symbol. They painted over it, of course, but every few months, it would start to reappear through the paint, like it was burned into the drywall. Maintenance eventually tore the entire wall out and rebuilt it. Didn't help. People started reporting whispers, scratches, shadows moving across the floor, the usual ghost story stuff. But here's what really got me. He said, no matter how many times they repaint that wall, the symbol always comes back. When I got back home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I even tried to look up anything about deaths in that hotel. I found a small local news article buried deep in the archives. Man found dead in hotel room, 'cause self-inflicted wounds. Room number 313. The article included a photo, blurry and grainy, but there, on the wall behind police tape, was the symbol. I don't know what it means. I've shown it to friends, even posted it on a few forums. A couple people said it resembled a sigil, something used in ritual magic, summoning, protection, or worse. I'll never know what I heard that night, or what whispered to me through that wall. But I know this much. Whatever that symbol is, it's still there. And someone or something on the other side of that wall is still watching. The 247 man. This happened in 2016, when I was in my second year of college. I had a small off-campus apartment I shared with my roommate, Kyle. It wasn't in the best area, but it was cheap, and the landlord didn't care how many noise complaints you got, which worked out because Kyle was a drummer. One night, I stayed in while Kyle went out to some party. I wasn't feeling great, bad headache, maybe the start of the flu. Around midnight, I turned off the TV and tried to sleep. That's when I heard the knock. It was soft, polite, 3 taps, and it came from the front door. I ignored it. I figured it was someone for Kyle or maybe a drunk neighbor. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Still soft, still deliberate. I got up and looked through the peephole. No one. I opened the door anyway, just to check. Nothing. I stepped out onto the porch and looked around. No footsteps in the fresh snow. Not a single mark. Weird. I went back inside, locked up, and sat on the couch for a few minutes, trying to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. Eventually, I went back to bed. At exactly 2:47 a.m., I woke up. No alarm. No noise. Just wide awake. I glanced at my phone, and the moment I saw the time, I heard something move in the hallway. A shuffle. I thought maybe Kyle had come back, drunk and clumsy, but I hadn't heard the front door. I got up, opened my door quietly, and looked into the dark hallway. Nothing. But the bathroom light was on. I called out, "Kyle?" No answer. I walked toward the bathroom and nudged the door open. Empty, light on, sink dripping, but no one inside. I shut it off and went back to bed. The next morning, I asked Kyle if he'd come home around 2:45. He said no. He got in around 4 a.m. and swore he was quiet as hell, tiptoeing around so he wouldn't wake me. He even sent me a pic from the party around 3. So, what the hell woke me up? Over the next few weeks, this became a pattern. I'd wake up wide-eyed and alert at exactly 2:47 a.m. every time. No alarm, no nightmares, just sudden, jarring consciousness. I started writing it down each time it happened. At first, it was every few days. Then it became nightly. And then the whispers started. Not every time, just now and then. I'd wake up, hear faint murmuring, and sit up in bed, straining to hear. Sometimes I'd think it was coming from the walls. Other nights, it felt like it was right outside my bedroom door. I mentioned it to Kyle. He joked it was probably stress or maybe the weed I'd started smoking to fall asleep. I started brushing it off too, until the night I saw him. I woke up, as usual, at 2:47 a.m. Only this time, I felt something different. The air in the room was cold, unnaturally cold. I could see my breath. I sat up and saw the silhouette of a man standing in the corner of my room, not moving, just standing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Sleep paralysis. Whatever. But I wasn't frozen. I could move. I reached for my phone to shine some light. The figure was gone. Dad shook me. I stayed up until sunrise. No more sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the carbon monoxide detector. I checked for mold. I checked every rational explanation. Nothing. I didn't want to admit I was scared. But I was. A few days later, Kyle's girlfriend came over to spend the night. The next morning, she pulled me aside and asked, "Hey, does someone else live here?" I said no. Just me and Kyle. She looked uncomfortable and said, "I swear I saw someone standing at the end of the hall last night. Like, watching us. Then they walked into your room." I stared at her. "What time?" She checked her phone. Right before 3? Like 2:45-ish. That was it for me. I started sleeping with the door locked and a chair propped under the handle. I kept the lights on. But still, every night, 2:47, I'd wake up. No dreams. No sounds. Just a cold, thick air, and this weight in my chest like I was being watched. One night, I was so fed up I decided to set up my phone to record while I slept. I used a time-lapse app that would capture the whole night in under a minute. When I woke up at 2:47, of course, I checked the footage immediately. Nothing for the first few hours. Just me tossing and turning. Then, at 2:46, something shifted. A dark blur appeared near the door. Not a figure, just a smudge. Like a shadow that had no source. It moved across the room in a jerky, unnatural way, frame by frame, and then stopped at the foot of my bed. Then it vanished. Just gone. I still have that clip. I've shown it to people. Some say it's just a glitch or compression artifact, but anyone who sees it always says the same thing. That doesn't look right. The last night I spent in that apartment was the worst. I'd started sleeping with headphones in, blasting white noise just to keep the whispers out. But even through the noise, I woke up, gasping at 2:47. My headphones were ripped out. Not fallen, ripped. And standing at the foot of my bed was the man. This time, I saw him fully. Tall, wearing some kind of tattered coat. Pale skin stretched thin over his face. No eyes, just hollow, sunken pits. His mouth was open like he was screaming, but no sound came out. He pointed at me, and then he vanished. Not walked away, not turned, just gone. I moved out the next day. Told Kyle he could keep the apartment. I never told him exactly what I saw. But about 2 months later, he called me. sounded shaken, said, "Hey man, you ever wake up at like the same time every night when you lived here?" I asked him what time. He hesitated, then said, 2:47. I told him to move. He did. I don't know who or what the 2:47 man is. I've searched online. I found other stories, posts from strangers claiming to wake up at the same time, feeling watched, hearing voices. I try not to read them anymore because last week, for the first time in years, I woke up in my new apartment, 2:47 a.m., and someone knocked on my bedroom door, the face in the drain. This happened when I was 14 in a house my family rented for about a year while my dad was between jobs. It was a small town in northern Michigan, quiet, forested, barely anything going on. The house itself wasn't fancy. One floor, creaky wood floors, and an unfinished basement that always smelled like dirt and wet copper. We barely used the basement. It was cold, drafty, and had those weird black stains in the corners that never seemed to dry. But the thing I remember most, what I still can't forget, is the shower. The bathroom was tiny, with this old beige fiberglass shower stall, the kind with a flickering light above it and a circular drain that never drained fast enough. My mom used to joke that it gurgled like it had indigestion, but it didn't sound like indigestion to me. It sounded like breathing. I noticed it about a month after we moved in. I'd be in the shower, and when I turned off the water, I'd hear this soft exhale from the drain. Not like a pipe clearing, a steady, slow breath. I told my parents, but they brushed it off. Old pipes, my dad said. That house was built in the 60s. Maybe he was right, until it started whispering. I swear on everything, I would turn off the water, and while drying off, I'd hear a whisper from the drain. Just one word. Hey. At first, I thought it was my imagination. I mean, who wants to admit they're hearing voices in the shower? So I started testing it. I left my phone recording on the sink while I showered. The first few recordings just picked up water sounds. Nothing strange. Then, one night, I played one back and heard it. Clear as day. I. Right after the water shut off. I showed my sister. She told me to stop screwing with her. I played it for my parents. My dad got annoyed and said I was trying to creep everyone out. So I gave up. But then the drain started smelling. It wasn't all the time, just occasionally after a hot shower. This awful, rotting meat smell, like something had died in the pipes. My mom poured bleach and baking soda down it constantly, but it always came back. Eventually, she called a plumber. He came one afternoon while I was homesick from school. I remember listening from my bedroom as he clomped around the bathroom, then went down into the basement to check the main lines. About 20 minutes later, I heard the door slam. I went to the living room and asked my mom what happened. She said, "He left. Didn't even say goodbye. Just told me not to worry about the drain. Said it was nothing he could fix." She laughed nervously like it was some weird plumber quirk. But the way she said it, I knew it bothered her. The next few weeks were quiet. The drain noises stopped. The smell was gone. Then, one night, I woke up needing to pee. I passed the bathroom and saw the light on. I knocked, assuming it was my sister. No answer. I opened the door slowly, and it was empty. But the light above the shower was flickering, and the shower curtain was wet, like someone had just stepped out. I was about to turn off the light when I heard it. Hey! I froze. The whisper came from the drain. I walked out and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went into the bathroom again to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I noticed something new. A scratch, right near the base of the shower, on the inside wall. It wasn't there before. 3 long, vertical scratches, like something had clawed at the fiberglass. I called my sister in to look. She said, "You probably did that with your shampoo bottle or something." But I didn't. That night, I had a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing in the bathroom, staring into the drain, and I saw an eye looking back up at me. bloodshot, unblinking, watching. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding. That was when I stopped using the shower. I told my mom I preferred baths in the sink. She thought it was weird, but didn't ask questions. One day, my sister screamed so loud the neighbors came over. She said she'd seen a face behind the shower curtain while she was brushing her teeth. A pale face, not reflected in the mirror behind the curtain. Of course, no one found anything. That weekend, my dad finally gave in and told us what he hadn't wanted to say earlier. Apparently, the previous tenants had broken their lease early. They never gave a reason, just left everything behind and disappeared. When the landlord came to inspect the property, he found water damage in the bathroom and a note scrawled into the wood underneath the stall. 3 words. Don't use it. That's all it said. My mom was furious we hadn't been told. My dad called the landlord, who brushed it off, said it was just paranoid nonsense from a mentally unstable woman. She thought something lived in the pipes, he told us. She said it whispered to her through the water. We moved out 2 months later. But here's the part that still haunts me. About a year after we moved, I got curious and tried to look up the property online. There wasn't much, but buried in an old local newspaper was a single article. It was about a man who used to live in the neighborhood. A reclusive guy, lived alone. The article was titled, "Man Found Dead in Storm Drain Tunnel Behind Eastview Street." That was our street. They said he'd been living in the tunnels for months. Found with bite marks on his arms, fingernails torn off, like he'd been trying to climb back up out of the drain. They never figured out how he got down there. But what made me sick was what the article ended with. They said his final words, mumbled to the EMT as they pulled him out, were, "Tell them I was just saying hey."